Welcome back. It's the Watch of the World today. Ukraine says it has carried out a drone attack against targets in southern Russia. Authorities say Ukraine intelligence destroyed 6 Russian planes at an airbase in Rostov region. Officials noted more aircraft were badly damaged and 20 service personnel could have been injured or killed. While Russia has not commented on the airfield attack, its officials said more than 40 drones had been aimed at the region which borders Ukraine. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Washington and every member of NATO is ready to double down on resources for Ukraine. He noted that the alliance is committed in the midterm and long-term support to Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression.
We're working to address these immediate concerns. We're also working together to build out Ukraine's force for the future, a force that can deter aggression and defend against it if it has to. More than 30 countries now have signed or are in the process of negotiating and signing bilateral agreements with Ukraine. And we're ourselves, the United States, working on our own bilateral agreement. But we're also looking at the role that NATO can and should play over time in supporting Ukraine. And this is an ongoing discussion that we'll have in the weeks ahead. And I imagine that you'll see something at the summit when we come together in Washington in July. In terms of stocks of equipment, supplies, one of the things we talked about today was everyone going back and taking an immediate and hard look at what can be made available. We know what the needs are: air defenses, artillery, munitions. So I believe, based on what I heard today, that everyone, including the United States, is going to double back and, as necessary, double down on finding the resources that Ukraine continues to need. With regard to funding, there are 2 things that I think are important. One, the immediate needs that Ukraine has to continue to resist effectively the aggression. That's where our supplemental comes in. That's where the assistance that the European Union announced is so critical. But we're also looking for ways to make sure that we can help Ukraine in the midterm and the long term develop a strong deterrent force, a strong defensive force, a strong force for the future. First, what the Defense Contact Group has done is remarkable. And I think the work that Secretary Austin did in establishing the support mechanism for Ukraine, in bringing allies and partners together over these many months and coordinating their efforts, has produced extraordinary results. And the question, I think, for us now and heading toward the summit is how we not only work, but strengthen the work that we're doing and that NATO's doing in that effort, both to meet Ukraine's immediate needs and, as I said before, to make sure that it's helping, and we're all helping, Ukraine build the force that it needs for the future to deter aggression and to defend against it. So these conversations over the last couple of days have been focused on exactly what we're going to do at the summit. We've begun a process among all the countries and with all the experts to flesh that out. We'll be using the time between now and the summit to do exactly that. I expect we'll have another meeting of the foreign ministers in Prague at the end of May. We look forward to a lot of work being done to design in detail exactly what the different roles are going to be going forward. We're focused on the here and now, and what I heard again and again and again was the indispensability of U.S. leadership and U.S. engagement. And we heard that from ally after ally. We've heard that from our Ukrainian friends as well. And we know that countries within this alliance and well beyond the alliance look to the United States for that engagement, for that leadership.
One person's been killed, 3 others injured after part of a crane fell from a building in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, in the United States. Crews were in the process of increasing the crane's height when a section of it came loose, falling with a construction worker who died. 2 of those injured have been taken to hospital, while a third was treated on site. Officials have closed off the Southeast 3rd Avenue Bridge indefinitely as they investigate the incident. The New River, which runs underneath it, has also been closed to marine traffic. Meanwhile, a rare earthquake has hit New Jersey, rattling buildings in neighboring New York City and its surrounding areas. The United States Geological Survey said the magnitude 4.8 quake's epicenter was just northeast of White House Station, New Jersey. Authorities say buildings were shaken in Brooklyn, rattling cupboard doors and fixtures. The earthquake hit at around 10:20 a.m. local time. However, there are no reports of major damage. Pretty interesting developments in New York City. Let's bring in our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Maria Bird. Maria, were there any shocks or aftershocks felt as far as Washington, D.C., where you are?
No, the actual earthquake shocks were mostly felt right outside of New York and New Jersey. And so it was a 4.8 magnitude earthquake, which substantially you could feel the shaking. Those that I've been in conversation with this morning regarding the earthquake that are actually in New York that did feel the shake said it was about a 25 seconds worth of a shake. You definitely felt it, but there has been no reported major damage. The challenge, as you probably know with the quakes, is that even though you might not see the damage today, potentially there could be some foundational damage to buildings and homes in those areas.
So no evacuation of people from their homes, at least for now. That means that no one is sleeping outside. Authorities already have that in check. So you said no major disaster. No major damage to buildings. How are we so sure about that? For some buildings that are as old as time, especially New York City, were they checked? Have they been checked by authorities?
There will be some checks throughout the day. It happened just a few hours ago, and so it's still in obviously the period of time that they're not quite sure of all of what could have occurred. And so I'm confident that we will probably see inspections of, as you mentioned, the very old buildings throughout New York City and the surrounding region to ensure of no foundational damage, which sometimes doesn't happen until a day or two later when you begin to see the cracks in buildings.
New York City, Maria, is packed with people, lots of tourists who want to see, many of the, tourist spots, for example, Central Park and, Times Square and all of that. I'm just wondering if, many of the tourists were shaken by, the earthquake and, if people there were rattled by the event.
Yes, people were very much, as you know, the East Coast does not experience earthquakes regularly. Washington experienced one over 10 years ago, but it's not a regular occurrence on the East Coast. And 4.8, even though it's not something that reaches a magnitude where you see major devastation on the onset, it's still strong enough to be felt. So obviously, as you mentioned, tourists and those residents in the regions were extremely surprised to have experienced this. But they are thankful, as you mentioned, that no one is being displaced because of it. And also no one was injured as of this time, no reported injuries.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Rescuers, meanwhile, in Taiwan are continuing their search for 18 people still missing after the 7.4 magnitude earthquake struck the island's rugged east coast earlier this week. The devastating earthquake in the eastern county of Hualien killed 10 people, injured more than 1,000 others, and left hundreds of people stranded in the country. According to Taiwan's fire department, 18 people are still missing, including 6 on a hiking trail and 4 foreigners previously listed as being Indian, Canadian, and Australian. Wednesday's quake was the worst in 25 years, but strict building regulations and widespread public disaster awareness appear to have staved off a major catastrophe. But still in Asia, Indonesia's most active volcano, Mount Merapi, has erupted, spewing ash and hot gas up to 1.5 kilometers into the sky. You can see pictures there. A thick column of smoke and ash billowing could be seen from a distance in central Java. Locals geared up their vehicles in case of an immediate evacuation. The volcano had been active regularly for the past few months when a fatal eruption in December reportedly killed at least 23 hikers and spawned ash on the West Sumatra horizon up to 3,000 meters. It erupted again in just over a month in January 14th to be specific, which caused Indonesian officials to declare a level 2 alert for volcanic activity and to wear face masks when in contact with falling ash. Indonesia is located on the Pacific Ring of Fire that's home to at least 127 active volcanoes. Politics now. The opposition in Myanmar has ordered a mass drone attack on the country's embattled military in the capital. The National Unity Government said 29 drones armed with explosives targeted the airport, Air Force Base and military headquarters. The military said it shot down 7 of the drones, with 1 exploding on the airport runway. The NUG represents the elected government that was toppled in a coup. Since 2021, the military has been fighting rebel insurgents since it seized power. The resulting civil war has killed thousands of people. It's displaced many more, about 2.6 million. But in recent months, it's been facing increasingly effective opposition to its rule and lost large areas of the country to armed resistance groups. Over in France now, a 42-year-old man has been sentenced to 30 years in prison for helping an Islamist attacker who killed 5 people at a French Christmas market in December 2018. The man, identified as Audrey Mondehi, was convicted of obtaining a gun used by Sheriff Shekat, who shot and stabbed his victims in Strasbourg, northeastern France. According to the prosecutors at the trial, the pair were former prison cellmates. 2 other men were handed shorter sentences for assisting with the crime. A 4th man was also acquitted. 5 people were killed when Shekat opened fire on the crowd at the festive market. He was shot dead by police 2 days later. President Emmanuel Macron is admitting France and other countries could have stopped the 1994 Rwandan genocide but lacked the will. He was speaking via video, which is set to be aired during the 30th commemoration of the Rwandan genocide on Sunday. Also, in a 2021 visit to Rwanda, Mr. Macron said that France had a duty to recognize the suffering she has inflicted on the Rwandan people by valuing silence over the examination of the truth for too long. During the genocide, ethnic Hutu extremists killed more than 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus. Several international guests, including French Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourné, and ex-US President Bill Clinton, are expected to attend the commemoration this weekend. In the meantime, the United Nations headquarters in New York has opened a new exhibit about the power of post-genocide reconciliation and the potentially deadly impact of hate speech. This coincides with the 30th anniversary of the 1994 genocide against Tutsis in Rwanda. The exhibit, named Remember, Unite, Renew, is organized by the Department of Global Communications and is a result of an international collaboration with the United Nations system in Rwanda, the Office of the Special Advisor on Rwanda on Genocide Prevention, the Government and Prison Fellowship of Rwanda, and the Aegis Trust. Visitors are invited to confront the realities of hate speech and the critical role each individual plays in fostering a culture of tolerance and understanding. The exhibit also features voices of Rwandan community members who provide insight into the challenges of forgiveness and the ongoing path to reconciliation in post-genocide societies. Well, hundreds of self-employed nurses marched protests in Paris, demanding higher wages and other tariff negotiations. Protesters say they also want to save community medicine and private practice nurses in particular. Demonstrators carried signs, as you see there, and flags. They also chanted slogans as they marched to the health ministry. Among them were many self-employed nurses who are paid by the state insurance fund for seeing patients at home or in health centers, but cover own costs such as travel expenses. Organized by a collective called Angry Liberal Nurses, the health workers complained about frozen pay rates since 2009. Many of them work in hospitals as salaried employees, while around 100,000 are practicing in health centers or operate in their private offices. We're staying in Europe or away from the nurses' protests in France. European Union and United States officials are meeting for the 6th Trade and Technology Council in Belgium. A forum for transatlantic cooperation and technology comes at a crucial time ahead of EU elections in June and US presidential elections in November. Well, joining us now with more is the DW's correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu in Berlin. Chiponda, thanks for joining us on the program. What's on the agenda for this meeting?
Well, EU and US representatives will be discussing closer collaboration when it comes to technology on topics including semiconductors, mobile communications, and artificial intelligence. And the timing of this meeting is, of course, important for both the EU and the US. For European officials, this meeting is also about ensuring that there are certain commitments from Washington, commitments that could be kept even if there were a change in the administration there. Now, that, of course, will depend on the result of the US presidential elections in November. These transatlantic talks are not just about EU-US cooperation, they are also about geopolitics. So China's role in global technology is on the agenda at the TTC meeting in Belgium.
I imagine that China will be on the agenda. Now, could the EU and the US join forces in taking on China, do you think?
Well, Brussels and Washington will be looking at how they can better coordinate their efforts against China. And one of the major topics will be Chinese semiconductors. EU officials are really concerned about so-called legacy chips made in China. Now, these are found in everything from washing machines and cars to even medical devices and military equipment. And while they are not as powerful as the state-of-the-art chips that power AI platforms, the West is concerned about China's dominance in this market. So the EU is expected to announce a plan to carry out a review of the bloc's entire chip supply chain, as there are also concerns about security risks and potential price dumping by Chinese chip makers.
Yeah, but that aside, can Europe compete with China at chip making?
That is highly unlikely. Despite some efforts here in Europe where we've seen Germany invest billions to ramp up chip production, current projections show that China will continue to be the global leader in legacy chip production. Chinese legacy chip making capacity is in fact set to grow to 39% of the overall global market in the next 3 years. Now that's according to data by TrendForce. European officials will need to strike a balance. On one hand, they need to ensure that the EU does not become too reliant on China for chips in everyday consumer electronics, military hardware, and critical infrastructure. And at the same time, they will want to make sure that their actions do not disrupt chip supply chains for European manufacturers. Now, that, of course, could prove tricky.
I guess we'll have to wait and see. Chiponda, thanks again for joining us. Voters in Kuwait are heading to the polls to elect new members of parliament as political disputes in recent years have created a deadlock between the National Assembly and the ruling family. The election is a first under the new emir, Sheikh Mishal Al-Ahmad Al-Sabah, who took over in December after the death of his half-brother. An estimated 835,000 Kuwaitis are eligible to vote in the Gulf state of 4.2 million people. About 200 candidates are contending to fill 50 seats. It's the fourth election in the country since December 2020. However, there have been concerns of low voter turnout, prompting the emir to warn public against boycotting the process. Staying with elections, 4 opposition parties and a civil society group in Togo have called for mass protests next week to demonstrate against the delayed parliamentary and regional elections. Political tensions have heightened following Parliament's approval of a contested constitutional reform last week due to replace the presidential system with the parliamentary one. Opposition parties have rejected the constitutional change, fearing it could let President Faure Gnassingbé stay in power. President Gnassingbé has been in power since 2005 when he replaced his father, who led the West African state for 38 years. On Wednesday, the presidency announced the postponement of the country's parliamentary elections, which were due to take place on April 20. The presidency has not set a new date for the polls, citing the need for more consultations over the reforms. The world needs to treat food security and affordability as crucial issues for global prosperity and well-being. That's according to PricewaterhouseCoopers Africa Assurance Partner Andrew Dale, who says Africa's food economy needs to be rebuilt with a focus on sustainability. Earlier in the week, Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa declared a national disaster to tackle the prolonged drought crisis. Mr. Mnangagwa said the country needs $2 billion in aid to help millions of people who are going hungry.
You know, in sort of central Africa towards the southern side, including South Africa, we've obviously been very hard hit by the impacts of El Nino. If you look at our February month, it was one of the hottest months on record, and we had extremely little rainfall during that month. And that is obviously for your summer crops, that is really a critical month when a lot of rain is needed. And in terms of looking at the crop estimates, we've seen from the first estimate that came out now to the revised estimate that we're looking at around a 25% reduction in your grains for the current year comparative to previous years. And I think that just joins on with a number of issues that we are seeing in Africa specifically, which leads to issues around food shortages and also food losses. And there's a lot of action that can be taken and needs to be taken in terms of turning this production that comes out of Africa into a sustainable one. And there's a lot of your sort of corporates that have to focus on environmental issues and governance issues and also sustainability that they need to report on. And a lot of those requirements are also going to be pushed down to grassroots levels where you have your different farmers that also play a role in the food value chain. And I guess it's a case of you can start taking some of the small steps now and already start preparing your business to be more sustainable in the future, or you can wait until it is enforced on you where you'll have to take a number of steps very quickly, which will also be very costly as well. Yes, so at PwC, obviously, we have a number of specialists and consultants that work regularly with government with regards to policy, workshopping policy, and having a look at how those policies and strategies can be rolled out, and also in terms of mapping what that impact can be, you know, in the short term, in the medium term, and then also in the long term. And I think it's very important to understand that in Africa, we have recognized that we do have a challenge. There is this looming food crisis, or we've always actually been in a situation of a food crisis. And I mean, it gets triggered through a number of issues such as poverty, food prices, the climate change.
Back home in Lagos, the Association of Nigerian Physicians in the Americas has announced its forthcoming ANPA Week medical mission to take place in Umuahia, the Abia state capital. This was on a courtesy visit to the chairman, CEO, Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Mrs. Abike Dabiri-Erewa, at the Lagos office of NIDCOM. President of ANPA, Dr. Chinyere Anyogu, explains that the association is a non-profit whose vision is a healthier Nigeria and healthier world. On her part, Mrs. Dabiri Erewa informed the delegation of the intention of the Tinubu administration to engage with Nigerian doctors in the diaspora and stated that NIDCOM would continue to work with the association and encourage every state in the country to support it.
The Tinubu administration.
As we're celebrating AMPA Week, AMPA, Association of Nigerian Physicians in the Americas, is a 501(c)(3) organization, non-for-profit, and the vision is a healthier Nigeria and a healthier world. And it outputs its vision by several activities, including that of a medical mission. Now, a medical mission itself, in which you come and see patients, is like giving people bread. But our goal within AMPA is not only to give the bread, as in deliver healthcare, it's also to empower the entity, the healthcare system, the populace, the stakeholders, to be able to deliver quality healthcare, not just by our presence, by bringing the expertise. AMPA has over 100 specialists in the medical, surgical, dental, and allied fields, but also to have some interdisciplinary collaboration and transfer of knowledge from both sides that's bidirectional, that can elevate the healthcare delivery even after we've gone. During AMPA Week, we see patients, we perform surgeries, we take care of dental problems, we deal with mental health issues. Because there's so many specialties, there's a huge range of interventions that are addressed. And this year, AMPA Week is in Abia State, Umuahia, and we're expecting somewhere between 70 to 80 providers, physicians, nurses, and other healthcare teammates to come to Abia to be able to administer AMPA Week, during which we provide healthcare. We also provide capacity building by training and workshops and education. And we also have advocacy as is part of the visit that we're here today.
Under this administration, there's an intention. The Tinubu administration is intentional about engaging Nigerian doctors in the diaspora. And that is why, for the first time, we have, of the two ministers, a minister specifically in charge of the diaspora. So we have the Minister of State focusing under his supervision, the issue of diaspora medical practitioners. So I expect a lot of things, a lot of collaborations to happen. And I'm glad that you're doing this, and you're also having doctors in the diaspora come and build hospitals back home.
Finally, on the program, Sotheby's Sports Auction in New York is kicked off with a bang, showcasing a treasure trove of legendary sports memorabilia. The art archives include Michael Jordan's game-worn Air Jordans from the 1996 NBA Finals and Muhammad Ali's boxing trunks from the historic 1975 Thriller in Manila bout against Joe Frazier. The auction, featuring over 350 items, has drawn considerable attention from sports enthusiasts and collectors alike. Among the highlights are a selection of basketball sneakers and jerseys from various NBA players, with Kobe Bryant's Los Angeles Lakers jersey and basketball shoes making a notable appearance. If you're a fan, this would be a good time to head on to New York City, as the auction opens until the 12th of April. Yeah, that's something to look forward to if you're a real sports fan. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.